Unlock the unknown. Unlock the unknown. So get inside your soul and dig a little deeper. Unlock the unknown. Discovering the truth will make you feel greater. Like a raging focus pain. Mysteries are hurricanes. The truth you seek is unknown. Unlock the unknown. I won't accept it what the skeptics even have to say. They disconnected, made a record and it's so cliche. So much evidence is building up in opposition. So many elements conclude the answer to this question. From the page of it to actuality. To unlock a locked door, where's the magic key? Unlock the unknown. So deep inside your soul and dig a little deeper. Unlock the unknown. Discovering the truth will make you feel freer. Like a raging focus pain. These mysteries are hurricanes. The truth you seek is unknown. Unlock the unknown.
And out of this cane field comes this figure walking upright.
I know what I saw that night. I saw it. I thought I was either dreaming or having some kind of hallucination.
That thing must have been at least 8 foot tall, maybe taller. Very athletic looking, very muscular. I would say the arms were 3 feet across.
And I seen this thing crossing the road, and it looked like it was probably 7.5 feet tall, maybe. And I mean, this thing was huge.
And welcome back to Squatch Ranger Files, episode 62, Windows, Weddings, and Washed Away Tracks. We've expanded the show to the Spotify for Creators platform, and we are very excited to be here. Spotify for Creators helps the show reach Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and many more. We hope to grow our audience and are able to continue to bring you the latest Bigfoot reports from around the country. The show has also been added to the Amazon Music app under the podcast section. We are also very excited to be a part of the Amazon community. If you are a new listener to the show, welcome. You are now an official Squatch Ranger. Your duties include have an open mind, ask questions, trust but confirm, and always seek the truth. Thanks for joining the show. Alright, real quick, to start things off, I want to take a quick moment to invite you over to my TikTok channel, Squatch Ranger. If you enjoy the eyewitness accounts, recreations, and strange moments we talk about on this podcast, you'll find even more of that over there, brought to life visually. On Squatch Ranger, I share short-form Bigfoot stories, eyewitness-inspired images, video recreations, and behind-the-scenes content that adds another layer to the cases we discuss here. A lot of the reports you hear on this show actually start or continue on TikTok. I post visual interpretations of sightings, unsettling moments caught at windows, encounters near homes, and those quiet, eerie experiences that stick with witnesses for the rest of their lives. It's a great way to see what people describe and to connect with a growing community of folks who take these encounters seriously. So, if you're on TikTok, go give Squatch Ranger a follow, drop a comment, share a video, and let me know you came from the podcast. Your support helps this show grow, help these stories reach a wider audience, and keeps the conversation going. Now, let's get into episode 62, Windows, Weddings, and Washed Away Tracks. So going into the next segment here, this is listener comments from previous episodes. This will be from Squatch Ranger Files episode 61. And of course, it comes from our biggest fan, EB. I think he's almost written into every episode since we've got on all the podcast apps. And he says, "Excellent episode. Thanks for posting my encounter. fantastic graphics. I really like the reports recorded by the eyewitness voices themselves. That really gives the reports credibility and validity. It's always great when they can provide a sketch also. Nice work, EB. Thank you so much, EB, for writing into the show again. Like I said, I think he's like the #1 fan of Squatch Ranger Files. He writes in on every episode. He's always positive. I think I need to reward him with a prize. So, EB, if you can think of some kind of Bigfoot type prize, let me know. I'll try to send a prize your way. Now, you know that here at Squatch Ranger Files, we are on a limited budget, so the prize can't be too extravagant, but let me know. I'll try to send a prize your way. Thank you so much. We used to give away prizes a few years ago. We had a couple of contests. I would really like to bring that back. I can't do that every episode, but I would like to have some prizes again. So anyway, that's just some thoughts out loud. All right, if you'd like to share your encounter story with us, email squatchranger@gmail.com. I would love to hear your encounter story and share it on this program. Before we get into tonight's reports, I want to set the stage for what you're about to hear, because this episode isn't about chasing Bigfoot. It's about running into something you didn't know had a name yet. In this episode of Squatch Ranger Files, we're bringing you 3 reports that span nearly 4 decades, 3 very different locations, and 3 very different types of encounters. But they all share one thing in common. None of these witnesses were looking for Bigfoot when it happened. Our first report takes us back to Northern California in 1986, on a sprawling ranch where a 5-year-old boy knew every inch of the land, every trail, every animal sound, every danger. But something didn't fit. Nighttime noises, a massive satellite dish violently shaken, and then, in broad daylight, a face pressed against a glass door, so tall it had to hunch just to look inside. A moment that wasn't frightening, because at that age, the witness thought the visitor might be the Easter Bunny. Years later, the realization would finally click. The second report moves us to Washington State in 1998, where a bored 10-year-old wanders outside a wedding reception at dusk. What he sees crossing a clearing isn't dramatic or aggressive, just massive, silent, and unmistakable. No growls, no glowing eyes, just a huge figure walking with purpose before slipping back into the trees. It would have taken nearly a decade and a random TV program for the weight of that moment to finally sink in. And our third report brings us into the present day, March of 2024, on the shorelines of Lake Eufaula in southeastern Oklahoma. No visual encounter this time, but something just as compelling. Large, faint footprints appearing briefly along the shore before being erased by water. Documented, photographed, and reviewed by an investigator who believes the reporting party and his son are honestly sharing what they found. These aren't campfire stories. These aren't thrill seekers. These are quiet moments, glimpses, realizations, and traces that stayed with people long after the encounter ended. So sit back and listen closely, because sometimes the most convincing stories aren't the loudest ones. They're the ones that almost slipped away. Number 1. When the Window Looked In. 1986. Sonoma County, California. Class A daytime sighting. The year was 1986. We lived on a 300-plus acre farm/ranch in the Santa Rosa area of Northern California. I was 5 years old at the time, and I already knew the 300 acres like the back of my hand. It was a wonderland for a young boy, from exploring, catching snakes, and fishing in the pond that was on the property. Every day there was an adventure waiting. Besides the yellow jackets, black widows, and the threat of rattlesnakes, I never came face to face with one, but heeded the sound of the rattle on a couple of occasions. I never felt afraid while exploring. One weird thing that sticks out is that it was common to find the carcasses of fawns on the property. Perhaps a food source for the fella who shows up later in the story? There were 2 houses on the property, about a half-mile away from each other as the crow flies. We lived in the lower house. My aunt was the live-in caretaker for the elderly property owner in the upper house. I had my own room in the back of the house. It was a small elevated single story surrounded by a small fruit tree orchard. My parents had converted the small garage at the front of the house into their bedroom, so our rooms were at opposite sides of the house. Outside my window, about 50 feet from the house, was a large-sized steel satellite dish, 6 or 7 feet tall/wide. The satellite dish is where the encounter starts. One night, I was awoken by a loud bang and the sound of something being shaken. I remember being too afraid to get up and run to my parents' room. The noises would periodically happen. I had told my parents about it, and my dad told me it was just one of the cows. A few times I found them trying to eat the fruit off the trees if someone had left the gate open. I started hearing other noises too, hoots and grunts. I knew all of the animals that called the land home. It wasn't a cow, dog, or barn owl. One day I was messing around behind the house. I threw a decent-sized rock at the satellite dish. The sound it made froze me. It was the same sound I was hearing at night while laying in my bed, balled up under the covers, scared, LOL. What I was hearing was the large satellite dish being violently shaken. The day it happened, my father wasn't home, so it had to have been a weekday. I didn't go to school that day. I remember lying on the couch, watching morning cartoons on one of the 5 TV channels we got. At some point, I fell asleep. One of those good naps you have when you're a kid. The entry door was in the living room. It was a double-pane sliding glass door. The couch was against the wall across from the sliding door. If you were laying on the couch, you could look across the room out the door. Outside the door, there was a decent-sized wooden deck. I awoke from my nap, rolled to my side, and looked out the door. That's when I saw him. I say him because I don't recall seeing any breasts on the creature. He was hunched over looking in the door at me. His face was pressed close to the glass. His stature was so big he drowned out the early afternoon sun that usually shone through the door and illuminated the living room. Take your forearm and cover your eyes. Now bend your neck so you can see under your forearm. That's exactly how he looked. He was so tall he had to bend over to look in the 7-foot-tall glass door. His hair was mid-length. It wasn't dark brown, but more of a lighter color. If I had to describe it, I'd say German Shepherd or Raccoon Gray, or pepper with some splotches of light brown/tan. His facial features looked more animal than he did man. He didn't look like a Neanderthal. Strangely, I wasn't scared, not one bit. I had no idea of what a Sasquatch was, or what a Bigfoot was. My 5-year-old self had no idea. I watched him, watching me, for a few more seconds, and then it clicked. The Easter Bunny was here. I jumped up off the couch and ran towards my parents' room, where my mother was, yelling at my mother to, "Come quick, he's here! The Easter Bunny's here!" By the time I had got her, we returned to the living room, and he was gone. I excitedly explained to her what I had seen. We went outside on the deck, but the Easter Bunny and his basket of goodies had slipped away. One evening, a few months later, I heard a commotion in the kitchen. I ran out of my room to find my sister, who was 3 or 4 at the time, was getting her evening bath in the kitchen sink. The sink was big enough for us kids to bathe in when we were small, like the size of the utility sinks that are common today. She said that she saw a bear looking in the window at her. The bottom of the window had to be 7 or 8 feet off the ground. Must have been a tall bear, LOL. I saw him one more time before we moved away from the property. After the elderly property owner passed away, we moved into the upper house, probably a year after my first encounter. We were heading up the road towards the house right before dusk. I was sitting in the back seat behind my dad, who was driving. I glanced towards the tree line that hugged one of the grass grazing areas for the cows and saw movement. Something was walking at the edge of the cut. I recognized the color and size. It was him. He quickly cut into the forest, gone before I could point him out to everyone in the car. It wasn't until we rented the big, bulky VHS player and a copy of Harry and the Hendersons a few years later did it finally click of what I saw, or experienced. It's been almost 40 years. I hope he is still cruising around the ranch. Maybe one day I'll go back and find out for myself. Follow up. NOBRO investigators report. The witness reports a series of encounters and unexplained disturbances occurring on a large, rural ranch property in the Santa Rosa region of Northern California during the mid-1980s. The primary witness was highly familiar with the land, spending extensive time exploring the property daily, and demonstrated early recognition of normal wildlife behavior and sounds. Prior to the visual encounter, the witness recalls recurring nocturnal disturbances near the family home, including loud impacts and violent shaking of a large steel satellite dish located approximately 50 feet from the residence. These events were accompanied by vocalizations described as hoots and grunts that did not match known local animals. The witness later confirmed the distinctive metallic sound by striking the dish himself during daylight hours, recognizing it as identical to the noises heard at night. The primary daylight encounter occurred in early afternoon while the witness was alone in the living room. Upon waking up from a nap, the witness observed a large, hair-covered humanoid figure hunched over and peering through a 7-foot-tall sliding glass door from an exterior deck. The figure's height required it to bend forward to see inside, and its body mass blocked sunlight from entering the room. The witness described mid-length hair of a light gray to peppered coloration, with tan patches, and facial features that appeared more animal than human, distinctively not resembling a Neanderthal-type appearance. The witness experienced no fear and, lacking any cultural knowledge of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, misidentified the figure as the Easter Bunny, demonstrating a strong innocence of interpretation indicator. The figure departed silently before an adult could be summoned. Several months later, the witness's younger sister independently reported seeing a bear looking into a kitchen window during an evening bath. The height of the window placement strongly suggests a tall, upright figure rather than a typical black bear. A final sighting occurred approximately 1 year later near dusk while the family was traveling by vehicle toward the upper residence on the property. The witness observed a large, similarly colored figure moving along the forest edge bordering a grazing pasture before it quickly entered the tree line. The witness reports that recognition of the encounters as Sasquatch related did not occur until years later after viewing the film Harry and the Hendersons, at which point the physical similarities became evident. Behavioral indicators. This report contains multiple behaviors consistent with documented Bigfoot activity patterns, such as repeated nocturnal disturbances near human structures, object manipulation, like violently shaking of a large metal satellite dish, vocalizations outside known wildlife patterns, peering into windows during daylight and evening hours, forest edge travel along grazing areas at dusk, and sustained presence over multiple seasons or years. Additionally, the discovery of deer fawn carcasses on the property suggests a potential large predator or scavenger utilizing the land as part of a regular feeding territory. Environmental and habitat assessment. The Santa Rosa region of Northern California offers ideal long-term habitat conditions for an unclassified large primate species. Land size and privacy. A contiguous 300-plus acre ranch provides seclusion, limited human disturbance, and diverse terrain. Dual residences separated by distance may have allowed the entity to monitor human activity patterns. Forested cover. Dense mixed oak woodland, conifer stands, and riparian corridors are common to the area. Forest edges bordering open pasture create natural travel lanes and observation points. Water sources. On-property pond used by livestock and wildlife. Seasonal creeks and nearby river systems common in Sonoma County. Food availability. Abundant deer populations, including fawns. Livestock adjacent forage opportunities. Small game, birds, reptiles, and seasonal fruits from orchard trees. Agricultural activity producing predictable food patterns. Topography and movement. Rolling terrain with wooded cut lines allows rapid concealment, and tree line adjacency to open fields supports observed edge-walking behavior. This account contains multiple high-value credibility markers. Child witnesses with no prior Sasquatch knowledge. Independent corroboration by a second juvenile witness. Repeated encounters across time and locations. Detailed recall of sound, color, posture, and behavior. Absence of fear-based embellishment or sensational claims. The subject's apparent comfort approaching the residence, manipulating objects, and visually observing occupants suggests long-term familiarity with the property and its human inhabitants. Based on the cumulative activity, environmental suitability, and behavioral consistency, this case represents a strong example of long-term Bigfoot presence on private rural land in Northern California. The repeated sightings and disturbances suggest a resident or semi-resident individual utilizing the ranch as part of a larger territorial range. This report is considered highly credible and aligns closely with established Sasquatch behavioral patterns documented throughout Northern California. Number 2. 3 golf balls and something else. 1998. Whatcom County, Washington. Class A, nighttime sighting. This is my first time sharing my story online. The purpose is to just memorialize my thoughts, as I've never actually written them down. I'll start by saying that this isn't my thing. I've lived the past 27 years not giving a about Bigfoot sightings, publications about it, TV shows on the matter. None of it. It's an event that left me with no trauma, mental anguish, or anything. It's simply an experience I've had. I've shared with friends and various people within my circle who find it hysterical and outlandish, but surprisingly, no one has ever blown off my story. It's actually been quite a validating experience. Well, here it goes. I was a typical 10-year-old 5th grader in 1998 who had never been on a plane or had ever experienced the United States outside of my home state of Pennsylvania or the East Coast. My older cousin and his fiancée were residents of Bellingham, Washington, and my mom and grandparents were gracious enough to have me tag along to attend his wedding. The ceremony took place north of Bellingham, Washington, at a golf course. It's now named Shuckson Golf Club, but I'm not certain that this was the name of the location in 1998. I've recently spent some time on Google Maps checking out the layout, and can confirm with 100% certainty that everything visible from satellite matches up with my memory. The reception had kicked off at dusk, and as only a bored 10-year-old would do, I ventured outside to throw some golf balls around on a practice green. This area was located next to a fairly large parking lot in front of the main venue. I have no recollection of anyone else being outside with me, as the outside entertainment area was located on the north side of the building, facing opposite from where I was. So there I was, rolling 3 golf balls back and forth, trying to make them into a hole, when something caught the corner of my eye. Bigfoot. 50 to 75 yards away from me, walking through a clearing between 2 areas of thick tree line. I was never scared, just captivated. The body was massive, I'd say 7 to 8 feet tall. No distinguishable features other than hair and a very specific walk. I distinctly remember wiping my eyes like, wait, what? 5 seconds later, it was gone. At the time, I made absolutely no correlation to Bigfoot, rather that I just saw something weird. After I caught my bearings, I went back inside to my grandmother and told her what I saw. She was a wonderful woman, but she dismissed my experience as, "This young buck wants attention because he's bored at my older grandson's wedding." Then that was it. Never thought about my experience again, until the late 2000s seemed to bring around the Bigfoot craze on TV, and I was randomly flipping through channels to land on the very moment that they were explaining the stats about the number of sightings in Washington compared to the rest of the country. I would have been between 17 to 19 years old during this time, and I was floored. This was the exact moment when I came to the realization of what I saw. Follow up. NOBRO Investigators Report. The witness reports a visual encounter with a large, unidentified, bipedal figure while attending a family wedding north of Bellingham, Washington, at what is now known as Shuckson Golf Club. During the reception at dusk, the witness left the building and was alone on a practice putting green adjacent to a large parking area. While rolling golf balls toward a hole, the witness observed a large, hair-covered figure, approximately 50 to 75 yards away, moving through a clearing between 2 dense tree lines. The figure was described as massive, estimated between 7 to 8 feet tall, with no distinguishable facial features visible at that distance. The witness specifically noted a very specific walk, consistent with bipedal locomotion. The observation lasted only a few seconds before the figure disappeared into the tree line. The witness reports no fear response at that time, only curiosity and confusion, and did not associate the sighting with Bigfoot until many years later when exposed to television programming discussing the high frequency of sightings in Washington state. The delayed realization is consistent with many childhood encounters reported in Bigfoot research, where context and cultural framing were absent at the time of the event. The witness states with high confidence that satellite imagery of the area today aligns precisely with their memory of the location and layout. Environmental and habitat assessment. Whatcom County represents a highly favorable environment for a reclusive, large primate species based on terrain, cover, food, availability, and water access. Forested cover and terrain. The area is characterized by dense Pacific Northwest forest, mixed conifer and deciduous growth, and frequent natural corridors between wooded areas. The nearby Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest provides vast, continuous wilderness with limited human intrusion. Golf courses in this region often border undeveloped forest land, creating edge habitats where wildlife movement is common, particularly at dusk. Water sources. The Nooksack River and its forks run throughout Whatcom County, providing year-round fresh water. Lake Whatcom and numerous smaller creeks and wetlands offer additional water sources and attract prey species. Potential food sources: large populations of black-tailed deer and elk, small game such as raccoons, rabbits, and rodents, seasonal berries, roots, and vegetation common to the region, salmon runs in nearby rivers which have historically been cited in regional Bigfoot reports, human activity and patterns. Dusk hours coincide with reduced human presence in outdoor recreational spaces. The proximity of forested areas to lightly developed land increases the likelihood of brief, accidental sightings during transitional periods. This report demonstrates several indicators commonly associated with credible Bigfoot eyewitness accounts. A non-believer witness with no prior interest in the subject. A short-duration sighting with no embellishment. A calm, non-fear-based emotional response. Delayed recognition tied to later contextual information. A location consistent with known sighting clusters and ideal habitat. While no physical evidence is available due to the age of the encounter, the consistency of the description, the environmental context, and the absence of sensationalism lend credibility to the account. From an investigative standpoint, Whatcom County, Washington, remains one of the most plausible regions in North America for sustained Bigfoot activity. This historical eyewitness account aligns well with regional patterns and habitat suitability and is considered a credible observational report worthy of inclusion in long-term research records. Number 3. Fisherman finds footprints. 2024. Southeast District, Pittsburgh County, Oklahoma. Class B, footprints. On March 23, 2024, I was fishing near the boat ramp in Bug Tussle, Oklahoma, on Lake Eufaula, and came across some interesting footprints on the shore. It could have been a prank, but there were very few of them, and they were faint. But it was classic Bigfoot looking. I've attached a few photos. For perspective, I put a hammer in one picture and had my teenage son put his size 10 shoe next to the best print I found. I went back the next day to attempt to get a cast, but it had been washed away. Follow-up NOBRO Investigators Report. On March 23, 2024, the reporting party, RP, was fishing along the shoreline near the public boat ramp in the Bug Tussle area of Lake Eufaula, Oklahoma. While walking the shore, the RP observed a small number of large, faint footprints impressed in the damp shoreline substrate. The RP immediately noted that the impressions appeared unusual in size and shape and did not resemble common human or animal tracks typically encountered in the area. Recognizing the potential significance, the RP photographed the best preserved footprint and included scale references for documentation. One photograph includes a standard hammer placed adjacent to the print for size comparison, while another shows the RP's teenage son's size 10 shoe positioned next to the impression. These photographs indicate a footprint substantially larger than a typical adult human foot and consistent with what is commonly described as classic Bigfoot type morphology. The RP returned to the location the following day with the intent to create a plaster cast of the track. Upon arrival, the footprints had been washed away due to changing shoreline conditions and water level fluctuation, eliminating the possibility of physical evidence collection. The reporting party submitted both a written statement and photographs via email. A follow-up phone interview was conducted by an investigator with the Native Oklahoma Bigfoot Research Organization. During this interview, the RP was found to be calm, consistent in his account, and cooperative. The investigator concluded that the RP was honestly reporting what he and his son observed, and did not appear to be fabricating or exaggerating the event. Footprint analysis and observations. Although no cast was obtained, the available photographs provided several noteworthy details. The footprint appears larger than a standard-sized tin shoe, suggesting a foot length beyond typical human proportions. The impression lacks clear evidence of footwear tread patterns. The edges of the print are soft and partially degraded, consistent with a brief exposure to water or wave action. Only a small number of prints were observed, which reduces the likelihood of a prank scenario, as hoaxes typically involve multiple repeated impressions. Due to shoreline erosion and wave activity common to Lake Eufaula, the faint nature of the tracks is considered consistent with a transient track maker, moving parallel to or briefly along the water's edge. Environmental and habitat assessment. Lake Eufaula and the surrounding bug tussle area provide highly favorable environmental conditions for wildlife and are consistent with areas where unexplained track finds have historically occurred. Water sources. Lake Eufaula is the largest lake in Oklahoma, offering abundant freshwater year-round. Numerous feeder creeks, coves, and wetlands surround the lake, creating natural travel corridors. Forested and covered areas. The shoreline in the bug tussle area is bordered by mixed hardwood forests, dense undergrowth, and seasonal ground cover. Adjacent wildlife management areas and undeveloped land provide concealment and reduced human activity, especially during early morning and evening hours. Food availability. White-tailed deer populations are strong in McIntosh County. Small game such as raccoon and feral hogs are common. Fish, freshwater mussels, turtles, and seasonal vegetation provide additional food sources. Human activity considerations. Boat ramps often see reduced foot traffic during off-peak hours, increasing the likelihood of wildlife using shorelines. Wildlife frequently follows water lines due to ease of travel and access to food and water. Investigator assessment. This case contains several elements that increase its credibility as a legitimate track discovery. Multiple witnesses present at the time of discovery. Immediate photographic documentation with scale references. Prompt attempt to return for evidence casting. Consistent testimony during phone interview follow-up. Environmental conditions that support rapid track degradation. While the lack of physical cast limits definite analysis, the totality of the circumstances suggests the reporting party encountered genuine, unexplained tracks rather than an intentional hoax. Based on the photographic evidence, witness credibility, and environmental context, this incident is classified as a credible unexplained footprint report. Lake Eufaula's extensive shoreline, dense surrounding habitat, and abundant food and water resources make it a logical area for transient or resident Bigfoot activity within Oklahoma. Although physical evidence was lost due to natural shoreline conditions, the report remains a valuable data point for ongoing research into Bigfoot presence in southeastern Oklahoma. You know, what stands out to me about tonight's reports isn't fear, it's how ordinary these moments felt to the people who experienced them. A 5-year-old on a ranch who didn't yet have a name for what was standing at his window. A bored kid at a wedding who just happened to look up at the right or wrong moment. The reporting party and his son fishing along a shoreline who found something that didn't last long enough to keep. None of these witnesses were chasing Bigfoot. None of them were out looking for proof. In fact, in 2 of these cases, years went by before the realization even hit that what they experienced might be something others have reported for generations. And I think that's important. Because if these encounters tell us anything, It's that whatever this phenomenon is, it doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's just a face at a window. Sometimes it's a silhouette crossing a clearing. Sometimes it's a set of footprints that appear quietly and disappear just as fast. These stories don't end with answers. They end with memories, with questions that don't demand belief, but do ask for consideration. And maybe that's the real thread that ties them together. Not proof, not certainty, but the simple fact that something happened and it stayed with them. As always, I want to thank the witnesses for trusting Squatch Ranger Files with their experiences. If you've had an encounter, whether it was 5 seconds or 50 years ago, you're not alone, and your story matters. Until next time, stay safe out there, keep your eyes open, and remember, sometimes the quietest moments leave the deepest tracks.